Hello. Tonight, we begin with the most fascinating fairy tale. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Master Thief. There was once upon a time a husbandman who had 3 sons. He had no property to bequeath to them, and no means of putting them in the way of getting a living, and did not know what to do. So he said that they had his leave to take to anything they most fancied, and go to any place they best liked. He would gladly accompany them for some part of their way, he said, and that he did. He went with them till they came to a place where 3 roads met, and there each of them took his own way, and the father bade them farewell and returned to his own home again. What became of the 2 elder, I have never been able to discover, but the youngest went both far and wide. It came to pass one night, as he was going through a great wood, that a terrible storm came on. It blew so hard and rained so heavily that he could scarcely keep his eyes open. And before he was aware of it, he had got quite out of the track, and could neither find road nor path. But he went on, and at last he saw a light far away in the wood. Then he thought he must try and get to it, and after a long, long time, he did reach it. There was a large house, and the fire was burning so brightly inside that he could tell that the people were not in bed. So he went in, and inside there was an old woman who was busy about some work. "Good evening, mother," said the youth. "Good evening," said the old woman. "Hutetu. It is terrible weather outside tonight," said the young fellow. "Indeed it is," said the old woman. "Can I sleep here and have shelter for the night?" asked the youth. "It wouldn't be good for you to sleep here," said the old hag, "for if the people of the house come home and find you, they will kill both you and me." "What kind of people are they, then, who dwell here?" said the youth. "Oh, robbers and rabble of that sort," said the old woman. "They stole me away when I was little, and I have had to keep house for them ever since. I still think I will go to bed all the same," said the youth. "No matter what happens, I'll not go out tonight in such weather as this." "Well then, it will be the worse for yourself," said the old woman. The young man lay down in a bed which stood near, but he dared not go to sleep. And it was better that he didn't, for the robbers came, and the old woman said that a young fellow who was a stranger had come there, and she had not been able to get him to go away again. "Did you see if he had any money?" said the robbers. "He's not one to have money. He is a tramp. If he has a few clothes to his back, that is all." Then the robbers began to mutter to each other apart about what they should do with him, whether they should murder him or what else they should do. In the meantime, the boy got up and began to talk to them and ask them if they did not want a manservant, for he could find pleasure enough in serving them. "Yes," said they, "if you have a mind to take to the trade that we follow, you may have a place here. It's all the same to me what trade I follow," said the youth. "For when I came away from home, my father gave me leave to take to any trade I fancied." "Have you a fancy for stealing, then?" said the robbers. "Yes," said the boy, for he thought that was a trade which would not take long to learn. Not very far off, there dwelt a man who had 3 oxen, one of which he was to take to the town to sell. The robbers had heard of this, so they told the youth that if he were able to steal the ox from him on the way, without his knowing, and without doing him any harm, he should have leave to be their servant man. So the youth set off, taking with him a pretty shoe with a silver buckle that was lying about in the house. He put this in the road by which the man must go with his ox, and then went into the wood and hid himself under a bush. When the man came up, he at once saw the shoe. "That's a brave shoe," said he. "If I had but the fellow to it, I would carry it home with me, and then I should put my old woman into a good humor for once." For he had a wife who was so cross and ill-tempered that the time between the beatings she gave him was very short. But then he bethought himself that he could do nothing with one shoe if he had not the fellow to it. So he journeyed onwards and let it lie where it was. Then the youth picked up the shoe and hurried off away through the wood as fast as he was able, to get in front of the man, and then put the shoe in the road before him again. When the man came with the ox and saw the shoe, he was quite vexed at having been so stupid as to leave the fellow to it, lying where it was, instead of bringing it on with him. "I will just run back again and fetch it now," he said to himself, "and then I shall take back a pair of good shoes to the old woman, and she may perhaps throw a kind word to me for once." So he went and searched for the other shoe for a long, long time, but no shoe was to be found, and at last he was forced to go back with the one which he had. In the meantime, the youth had taken the ox and gone off with it. When the man got there and found that his ox was gone, he began to weep and wail, for he was afraid that when his old woman got to know, she would be the death of him. But all at once it came into his head to go home and get the other ox and drive it to the town, and take good care that his old wife knew nothing about it. So he did this. He went home and took the ox without his wife's knowing about it, and went on his way to the town with it. But the robbers, they knew it well, because they got out their magic, and so they told the youth that if he could take this ox also without the man knowing anything about it and without doing him any hurt, he should then be on an equality with them. Well, that will not be a very hard thing to do, thought the youth. This time he took with him a rope and put it under his arms and tied himself up to a tree, which hung over the road that the man would have to take. So the man came with his ox, and when he saw the body hanging there, he felt a little queer. "What a hard lot yours must have been to make you hang yourself," said he. "Ah, well, you may hang there for me. I can't breathe life into you again." So on he went with his ox. Then the youth sprang down from the tree, ran by a short cut, and got before him, and once more hung himself up on a tree in the road before the man. "How I should like to know if you really were so sick at heart that you hanged yourself there, or if it is only a hobgoblin that's before me," said the man. "Ah, well, you may hang there for me, whether you are a hobgoblin or not." And on he went with his ox. Once more, the youth did just as he had done twice already. Jumped down from the tree, ran by a short cut through the wood, and again hanged himself in the very middle of the road before him. But when the man once more saw this, he said to himself, "What a bad business this is. Can they all have been so heavy-hearted that they have all three hanged themselves? No, I can't believe that it is anything but witchcraft. But I will know the truth," he said. "If the two others are still hanging there, it is true. But if they are not, it's nothing else but witchcraft." So he tied up his ox and ran back to see if they really were hanging there. While he was going and looking up at every tree as he went, the youth leapt down and took his ox and went off with it. Anyone may easily imagine what a fury the man fell into when he came back and saw that his ox was gone. He wept and he raged. But at last he took comfort and told himself that the best thing to do was to go home and take the third ox, without letting his wife know anything about it, and then try to sell it so well that he got a good sum of money for it. So he went home and took the third ox and drove it off without his wife knowing anything about it. But the robbers knew all about it, and they told the youth that if he could steal this as he had stolen the two others, he should be master of the whole troop. So the youth set out and went to the wood. And when the man was coming along with the ox, he began to bellow loudly, just like a great ox somewhere inside the wood. When the man heard that he was right glad, for he fancied he recognized the voice of his big bullock, and thought that now he should find both of them again. So he tied up the third, and ran away off the road to look for them in the wood. In the meantime, the youth went away with the third ox. When the man returned, and found that he had lost that too, he fell into such a rage that there was no bounds to it. He wept and lamented, and for many days he did not dare to go home again, for he was afraid that the old woman would slay him outright. The robbers also were not very well pleased at this, for they were forced to own that the youth was at the head of them all. So one day they made up their minds to set to work to do something which it was not in his power to accomplish. And they all took to the road together, and left him at home alone. When they were well out of the house, the first thing that he did was to drive the oxen out on the road, whereupon they all ran home again to the man from whom he had stolen them. And right glad was the husbandman to see them. Then he brought out all the horses the robbers had, and loaded them with the most valuable things which he could find, vessels of gold and of silver, and clothes, and other magnificent things. And then he told the old woman to greet the robbers from him, and thank them from him, and say that he had gone away, and that they would have a great deal of difficulty in finding him again. And with that, he drove the horses out of the courtyard. After a long, long time, he came to the road on which he was traveling, when he came to the robbers. And when he had got very near home, and was in sight of the house where his father lived, he put on a uniform which he had found among the things he had taken from the robbers, and which was made just like a general's, and drove into the yard just as if he were a great man. Then he entered the house and asked if he could find a lodging there. "No, indeed you can't," said his father. "How could I possibly be able to lodge such a great gentleman as you? It is all that I can do to find clothes and bedding for myself, and wretched they are." "You were always a hard man," said the youth, "and hard you are still if you refuse to let your own son come into your house." "Are you my son?" said the man. "Do you not know me again then?" said the youth. Then he recognized him and said, "But what trade have you taken to that has made you such a great man in so short a time?" "Oh, that I will tell you," answered the youth. "You said that I might take to anything I liked, so I apprenticed myself to some thieves and robbers, and now I have served my time and have become master thief." Now the governor of the province lived by his father's cottage, and this governor had such a large house and so much money that he did not even know how much it was. And he had a daughter, too, who was both pretty and dainty, and good and wise. So the master thief was determined to have her to wife, and told his father that he was to go to the governor and ask for his daughter for him. If he asks what trade I follow, you may say that I am a master thief, said he. I think you must be crazy, said the man, for you can't be in your senses if you think of anything so foolish. You must go to the governor and beg for his daughter. There is no help, said the youth. But I dare not go to the governor and say this. He is so rich and has so much wealth of all kinds, said the man. There is no help for it, said the master thief. Go you must, whether you like it or not. If I can't get you to go by using good words, I will soon make you go with bad ones. But the man was still unwilling. So the master thief followed him, threatening him with a great birch stick, till he went weeping and wailing through the door to the governor of the province. Now, my man, and what's amiss with you? Said the governor. So he told him that he had 3 sons who had gone away one day, and how he had given them permission to go where they chose, and take to whatsoever work they fancied. Now, he said, the youngest of them has come home, and has threatened me till I have come to you to ask for your daughter for him. And I am to say that he is a master thief. And again the man fell a-weeping and lamenting. Console yourself, my man, said the governor, laughing. You may tell him from me that he must first give me some proof of this. If he can steal the joint off the spit in the kitchen on Sunday, when every one of us is watching it, he shall have my daughter. Will you tell him that? The man did tell him, and the youth thought it would be easy enough to do it. So he set himself to work to catch 3 hares alive, put them in a bag, clad himself in some old rags, so that he looked so poor and wretched that it was quite pitiable to see him. And in this guise on Sunday forenoon, he sneaked into the passage with his bag, like any beggar boy. The governor himself and everyone in the house was in the kitchen, keeping watch over the joint. While they were doing this, the youth let one of the hares slip out of his bag, and off it set, and began to run round the yard. Just look at that hare, said the people in the kitchen, and wanted to go out and catch it. The governor saw it too, but said, Oh, let it go. It's no use to think of catching a hare when it's running away. It was not long before the youth let another hare out, and the people in the kitchen saw this too, and thought that it was the same. So again they wanted to go out and catch it, but the governor again told them that it was of no use to try. Very soon afterwards, however, the youth let slip the third hare, and it set off and ran round and round the courtyard. The people in the kitchen saw this too, and believed that it was still the same hare that was running about. So they wanted to go out and catch it. "It's a remarkably fine hare," said the governor. "Come and let us see if we can get hold of it." So out he went, and the others with him, and away went the hare, and they after it, in real earnest. In the meantime, however, the master thief took the joint and ran off with it. And whether the governor got any roast meat for his dinner that day, I know not. But I know that he had no roast hare, though he chased it till he was both hot and tired. At noon came the priest, and when the governor had told him of the trick played by the master thief, there was no end to the ridicule he cast on the governor. "For my part," said the priest, "I can't imagine myself being made a fool of by such a fellow as that." "Well, I advise you to be careful," said the governor, "for he may be with you before you are at all aware." But the priest repeated what he had said, and mocked the governor for having allowed himself to be made such a fool of. Later in the afternoon, the master thief came and wanted to have the governor's daughter as he had promised. "You must first give some more samples of your skill," said the governor, trying to speak him fair. "For what you did today was no such very great thing after all. Couldn't you play off a really good trick on the priest? For he is sitting inside there and calling me a fool for having let myself be taken in by such a fellow as you. Well, it wouldn't be very hard to do that," said the master thief. So he dressed himself up like a bird, and threw a great white sheet over himself, broke off a goose's wings, and set them on his back, and in this attire climbed into a great maple tree which stood in the priest's garden. So when the priest returned home in the evening, the youth began to cry, "Father Lawrence, Father Lawrence," for the priest was called Father Lawrence. "Who is calling me?" said the priest. "I am an angel sent to announce to thee that because of thy piety thou shalt be taken away alive into heaven," said the master thief. "Wilt thou hold thyself in readiness to travel away next Monday night? For then will I come and fetch thee, and bear thee away with me in a sack. And thou must lay all thy gold and silver, and whatsoever thou mayest possess of this world's wealth, in a heap in thy best parlor." So Father Lawrence fell down on his knees before the angel and thanked him. And the following Sunday he preached a farewell sermon, and gave out that an angel had come down into the large maple tree in his garden, and had announced to him that, because of his righteousness, he should be taken up alive into heaven. And as he thus preached and told them this, everyone in the church, old or young, wept. On Monday night, the master thief once more came as an angel. And before the priest was put into the sack, he fell on his knees and thanked him. But no sooner was the priest safely inside it than the master thief began to drag him away over stocks and stones. "Oh, oh," cried the priest in the sack. "Where are you taking me?" "This is the way to heaven." "The way to heaven is not an easy one," said the master thief, and dragged him along till he all but killed him. At last he flung him into the governor's goose house, and the geese began to hiss and peck at him, till he felt more dead than alive. "Oh, oh, oh, where am I now?" asked the priest. "Now you are in purgatory," said the master thief, and off he went, and took the gold and the silver, and all the precious things which the priest had laid together in his best parlor. Next morning, when the goose girl came to let out the geese, she heard the priest bemoaning himself as he lay in the sack in the goose house. "Oh, heavens! Who is that? And what ails you?" said she. "Oh," said the priest, "if you are an angel from heaven, do let me out, and let me go back to earth again, for no place was ever so bad as this. The little fiends nip me so with their tongs." "I am no angel," said the girl, and helped the priest out of the sack. "I only look after the governor's geese. That's what I do. And they are the little fiends which have pinched your reverence. This is the master thief's doing." "Oh, my gold and my silver and my best clothes!" shrieked the priest. And wild with rage, he ran home so fast that the goose girl thought he had suddenly gone mad. When the governor learnt what had happened to the priest, he laughed till he nearly killed himself. But when the master thief came and wanted to have his daughter, according to promise, he once more gave him nothing but fine words, and said, "You must give me one more proof of your skill, so that I can really judge of your worth. I have 12 horses in my stable, and I will put 12 stable boys in it, one on each horse. If you are clever enough to steal the horses from under them, I will see what I can do for you." "What you set me to do can be done," said the master thief. "But am I certain to get your daughter when it is?" "Yes. If you can do that, I will do my best for you," said the governor. So the master thief went to a shop and bought enough brandy to fill 2 pocket flasks. And he put a sleeping drink into one of these, but into the other he poured brandy only. Then he engaged 11 men to lie that night in hiding behind the governor's stable. After this, by fair words and good payment, he borrowed a ragged gown and a jerkin from an aged woman, and then, with a staff in his hand and a poke on his back, he hobbled off as evening came on towards the governor's stable. The stable boys were just watering the horses for the night, and it was quite as much as they could do to attend to that. "What on earth do you want here?" said one of them to the old woman. "Oh dear, how cold it is," she said, sobbing and shivering with cold. Oh dear, it's cold enough to freeze a poor old body to death." And she shivered and shook again, and said, "For heaven's sake, give me leave to stay here and sit just inside the stable door." "You will get nothing of the kind. Be off this moment. If the governor were to catch sight of you here, he would lead us a pretty dance," said one. "Oh, what a poor, helpless old creature," said another, who felt sorry for her. "That poor old woman can do no harm to anyone. She may sit there and welcome." The rest of them thought that she ought not to stay. But while they were disputing about this and looking after the horses, she crept farther and farther into the stable, and at last sat down behind the door. And when once she was inside, no one took any more notice of her. As the night wore on, the stable boys found it rather cold work to sit still on horseback. "Hutetu, but it is fearfully cold," said one, and began to beat his arms backwards and forwards across his breast. "Yes, I am so cold that my teeth are chattering," said another. "If one had but a little tobacco," said a third. Well, one of them had a little, so they shared it among them, though there was very little for each man, but they chewed it. This was some help to them, but very soon they were just as cold as before. "Hutetu," said one of them, shivering again. "Hutetu," said the old woman, gnashing her teeth together till they chattered inside her mouth. And then she got out the flask, which contained nothing but brandy, and her hands trembled so that she shook the bottle about, and when she drank, it made a great gulp in her throat. "What is that you have in your flask, old woman?" asked one of the stable boys. "Oh, it's only a little drop of brandy, Your Honor," she said. "Brandy? What? Let me have a drop! Let me have a drop!" screamed all the 12 at once. "Oh, but what I have is so little," whimpered the old woman. "It will not even wet your mouths." But they were determined to have it, and there was nothing to be done but give it. So she took out the flask with the sleeping drink and put it to the lips of the first of them. And now she shook no more, but guided the flask so that each of them got just as much as he ought. And the 12th had not done drinking before the first was already sitting, snoring. Then the master thief flung off his beggar's rags and took one stable boy after the other and gently set him astride on the partitions which divided the stalls. And then he called his 11 men who were waiting outside, and they rode off with the governor's horses. In the morning, when the governor came to look after his stable boys, they were just beginning to come to again. They were driving their spurs into the partition till the splinters flew about. And some of the boys fell off, and some still hung on, and sat looking like fools. "Ah, well," said the governor, "it is easy to see who has been here, but what a worthless set of fellows you must be to sit here and let the master thief steal the horses from under you." And they all got a beating for not having kept watch better. Later in the day, the master thief came and related what he had done, and wanted to have the governor's daughter as had been promised. But the governor gave him $100 and said that he must do something that was better still. "Do you think you can steal my horse from under me when I am out riding on it?" said he. "Well, it might be done," said the master thief, "if I were absolutely certain that I should get your daughter." So the governor said that he would see what he could do. And then he said that on a certain day he would ride out to a great common where they drilled the soldiers. So the master thief immediately got hold of an old, worn-out mare and set himself to work to make a collar for it of green withies and branches of broom, bought a shabby old cart and a great kaiho. And then he told a poor old beggar woman that he would give her $10 if she would get into the car and keep her mouth wide open beneath the tap hole into which he was going to stick his finger. No harm should happen to her, he said. She should only be driven about a little, and if he took his finger out more than once, she should have $10 more. Then he dressed himself in rags, dyed himself with soot, and put on a wig and a great beard of goat's hair, so that it was impossible to recognize him, and went to the parade ground, where the governor had already been riding about a long time. When the master thief got there, the mare went along so slowly and quietly that the cart hardly seemed to move from the spot. The mare pulled it a little forward, and then a little back, and then it stopped quite short. Then the mare pulled a little forward again, and it moved with such difficulty that the governor had not the least idea that this was the master thief. He rode straight up to him and asked if he had seen anyone hiding anywhere about in a wood that was close by. "No," said the man, "that have I not." "Hark you," said the governor, "if you will ride into that wood and search it carefully to see if you can light upon a fellow who is hiding in there, you shall have the loan of my horse and a good present of money for your trouble." "I am not sure that I can do it," said the man, "for I have to go to a wedding with this cask of mead which I have been to fetch, and the tap has fallen out on the way. So now I have to keep my finger in the tap hole as I drive." "Oh, just ride off," said the governor, "and I will look after the cask and the horse too." So the man said that if he would do that, he would go. But he begged the governor to be very careful to put his finger into the tap hole the moment he took his out. So the governor said that he would do his very best, and the master thief got on the governor's horse. But time passed, and it grew later and later, and still the man did not come back. And at last the governor grew so weary of keeping his finger in the tap hole that he took it out. "Now I shall have $10 more," cried the old woman inside the cask. So he soon saw what kind of mead it was, and set out homewards. When he had gone a very little way, he met his servant bringing him the horse, for the master thief had already taken it home. The following day, he went to the governor and wanted to have his daughter according to promise. But the governor again put him off with fine words, and only gave him $300, saying that he must do one more masterpiece of skill. And if he were but able to do that, he should have her. Well, the master thief thought he might, if he could hear what it was. "Do you think you can steal the sheet off our bed and my wife's nightgown?" said the governor. "That is by no means impossible," said the master thief. "I only wish I could get your daughter as easily." So late at night, the master thief went and cut down a thief who was hanging on the gallows, laid him on his own shoulders, and took him away with him. Then he got hold of a long ladder, set it up against the governor's bedroom window, and climbed up and moved the dead man's head up and down, just as if he were someone who was standing outside and peeping in. "There's the master thief, mother," said the governor, nudging his wife. "Now I'll just shoot him, that I will." So he took up a rifle which he had laid at his bedside. "Oh no, you must not do that," said his wife. "You yourself arranged that he was to come here." "Yes, mother, I will shoot him," said he, and lay there aiming, and then aiming again, for no sooner was the head up, and he caught sight of it, than it was gone again. At last he got a chance and fired, and the dead body fell with a loud thud to the ground. And down went the master thief too, as fast as he could. "Well," said the governor, "I certainly am the chief man about here, but people soon begin to talk, and it would be very unpleasant if they were to see this dead body. The best thing that I can do is to go out and bury him." "Just do what you think best, father," said his wife. So the governor got up and went downstairs, and as soon as he had gone out through the door, the master thief stole in and went straight upstairs to the woman. "Well, father dear," said she, for she thought it was her husband, Have you got done already?" "Oh, yes. I only put him into a hole," said he, "and raked a little earth over him. That's all I have been able to do tonight, for it is fearful weather outside. I will bury him better afterwards. But just let me have the sheet to wipe myself with, for he was bleeding, and I have got covered with blood with carrying him." So she gave him the sheet. "You will have to let me have your nightgown too," he said, "for I begin to see that the sheet won't be enough." Then she gave him her nightgown. But just then it came into his head that he had forgotten to lock the door, and he was forced to go downstairs and do it before he could lie down in bed again. So off he went with the sheet, and the nightgown too. An hour later, the real governor returned. "Well, what a time it has taken to lock the house door, father," said his wife. "And what have you done with the sheet and the nightgown?" "What do you mean?" asked the governor. "Oh, I am asking you what you have done with the nightgown and sheet that you got to wipe the blood off yourself with," said she. "Good heavens," said the governor. "Has he actually got the better of me again?" When day came, the master thief came too, and wanted to have the governor's daughter, as had been promised. And the governor dared do no otherwise than give her to him, and much money besides, for he feared that if he did not, the master thief might steal the very eyes out of his head, and that he himself would be ill spoken of by all men. The master thief lived well and happily from that time forth, and whether he ever stole any more or not, I cannot tell you. But if he did, it was but for pastime. Brother and sister. Brother took sister by the hand and said, "Look here, we haven't had one single happy hour since our mother died. That stepmother of ours beats us regularly every day, and if we dare go near her, she kicks us away. We never get anything but hard, dry crusts to eat. Why, the dog under the table is better off than we are. She does throw him a good morsel or two now and then. Oh dear, if our own dear mother only knew all about it. Come along, and let us go forth into the wide world together." So off they started through fields and meadows, over hedges and ditches, and walked the whole day long. And when it rained, sister said, "Heaven and our hearts are weeping together." Towards evening, they came to a large forest, and were so tired out with hunger and their long walk, as well as all their trouble, that they crept into a hollow tree and soon fell fast asleep. Next morning, when they woke up, the sun was already high in the heavens and was shining down bright and warm into the tree. Then said brother, "I'm so thirsty, sister. If I did but know where to find a little stream, I'd go and have a drink. I do believe I hear one." He jumped up, took sister by the hand, and they set off to hunt for the brook. Now, their cruel stepmother was in reality a witch, and she knew perfectly well that the two children had run away. She had crept secretly after them and had cast her spells over all the streams in the forest. Presently, the children found a little brook dancing and glittering over the stones, and Brother was eager to drink of it. But as it rushed past, Sister heard it murmuring, "Who drinks of me will be a tiger. Who drinks of me will be a tiger." So she cried out, "Oh, dear brother, pray don't drink, or you'll be turned into a wild beast and tear me to pieces." Brother was dreadfully thirsty, but he did not drink. "Very well," said he, "I'll wait till we come to the next spring." When they came to the second brook, Sister heard it repeating too, "Who drinks of me will be a wolf. Who drinks of me will be a wolf." And she cried, "Oh, brother, pray don't drink here either, or you'll be turned into a wolf and eat me up." Again, Brother did not drink, but he said, "Well, I'll wait a little longer till we reach the next stream. But then, whatever you may say, I really must drink, for I can bear this thirst no longer." And when they got to the third brook, Sister heard it say, as it rushed past, "Who drinks of me will be a roe. Who drinks of me will be a roe." And she begged, "Ah, brother, don't drink yet, or you'll become a roe and run away from me." But her brother was already kneeling by the brook and bending over it to drink. And sure enough, no sooner had his lips touched the water than he fell on the grass, transformed into a little roebuck. Sister cried bitterly over her poor bewitched brother, and the little roe wept too, and sat sadly by her side. At last the girl said, "Never mind, dear little fawn, I will never forsake you." And she took off her golden garter and tied it round the roe's neck. Then she plucked rushes and plaited a soft cord of them, which she fastened to the collar. When she had done this, she led the roe farther and farther, right into the depths of the forest. After they had gone a long, long way, they came to a little house, and when the girl looked into it, she found it was quite empty. And she thought, "Perhaps we might stay and live here." So she hunted up leaves and moss to make a soft bed for the little roe, and every morning and evening she went out and gathered roots, nuts, and berries for herself, and tender young grass for the fawn. And he fed from her hand, and played round her, and seemed quite happy. In the evening, when Sister was tired, she said her prayers, and then laid her head on the fawn's back, and fell sound asleep with it as a pillow. And if Brother had but kept his natural form, really, it would have been a most delightful kind of life. They had been living for some time in the forest in this way, when it came to pass that the king of that country had a great hunt through the woods. Then the whole forest rang with such a blowing of horns, baying of dogs, and joyful cries of huntsmen that the little roe heard it and longed to join in too. "Ah," said he to Sister, "do let me go off to the hunt. I can't keep still any longer." And he begged and prayed till at last she consented. "But," said she, "mind you come back in the evening. I shall lock my door fast for fear of those wild huntsmen. So, to make sure of my knowing you, knock at the door and say, 'My sister, dear, open. I'm here.' If you don't speak, I shan't open the door." So off sprang the little roe, and he felt quite well and happy in the free open air. The king and his huntsmen soon saw the beautiful creature and started in pursuit, but they could not come up with it. And whenever they thought they were sure to catch it, it bounded off to one side into the bushes and disappeared. When night came on, it ran home, and knocking at the door of the little house, cried, "My sister, dear, open. I'm here." The door opened, and he ran in and rested all night on his soft, mossy bed. Next morning, the hunt began again, and as soon as the little roe heard the horns and the ho, ho of the huntsman, he could not rest another moment, and said, "Sister, open the door. I must get out." So Sister opened the door and said, "Now mind, and get back by nightfall, and say your little rhyme." As soon as the king and his huntsmen saw the roe with the golden collar, they all rode off after it. But it was far too quick and nimble for them. This went on all day, but as evening came on, the huntsmen had gradually encircled the roe, and one of them wounded it slightly in the foot, so that it limped and ran off slowly. Then the huntsman stole after it as far as the little house, and heard it call out, "My sister, dear, open. I'm here." And he saw the door open and close immediately the fawn had run in. The huntsman remembered all this carefully, and went off straight to the king, and told him all he had seen and heard. "Tomorrow we will hunt again," said the king. Poor Sister was terribly frightened when she saw how her little fawn had been wounded. She washed off the blood, bound up the injured foot with herbs, and said, "Now, dear, go and lie down and rest, so that your wound may heal." The wound was really so slight that it was quite well next day, and the little roe did not feel it at all. No sooner did it hear the sounds of hunting in the forest than it cried, "I can't stand this. I must be there too. I'll take care they shan't catch me." Sister began to cry and said, "They are certain to kill you, and then I shall be left all alone in the forest and forsaken by everyone. I can't and won't let you out." "Then I shall die of grief," replied the roe. "For when I hear that horn, I feel as if I must jump right out of my skin." So at last, when Sister found there was nothing else to be done, she opened the door with a heavy heart. And the roe darted forth, full of glee and health, into the forest. As soon as the king saw the roe, he said to his huntsman, "Now then, give chase to it all day till evening. But mind, and be careful not to hurt it." When the sun had set, the king said to his huntsman, "Now come and show me the little house in the wood." And when he got to the house, he knocked at the door and said, "My sister dear, open. I'm here." Then the door opened, and the king walked in. And there stood the loveliest maiden he had ever seen. The girl was much startled when, instead of the little roe she saw a man with a gold crown on his head walk in. But the king looked kindly at her, held out his hand, and said, "Will you come with me to my castle and be my dear wife?" "Oh, yes," replied the maiden, "but you must let my roe come too. I could not possibly forsake it. It shall stay with you as long as you live, and shall want for nothing," the king promised. In the meantime, the roe came bounding in, and Sister tied the rush cord once more to its collar, took the end in her hand, and so they left the little house in the forest together. The king lifted the lonely maiden onto his horse and led her to his castle, where the wedding was celebrated with the greatest splendor. The roe was petted and caressed and ran about at will in the palace gardens. Now, all this time, the wicked stepmother, who had been the cause of these poor children's misfortunes and trying adventures, was feeling fully persuaded that Sister had been torn to pieces by wild beasts, and brother shot to death in the shape of a roe. When she heard how happy and prosperous they were, her heart was filled with envy and hatred, and she could think of nothing but how to bring some fresh misfortune on them. Her own daughter, who was as hideous as night and had only one eye, reproached her by saying, "It is I who ought to have had this good luck and been queen." "Be quiet, will you?" said the old woman. "When the time comes, I shall be at hand." Now after some time, it happened one day, when the king was out hunting, that the queen gave birth to a beautiful little boy. The old witch thought here was a good chance for her. So she took the form of the lady in waiting, and hurrying into the room where the queen lay in her bed, called out, "The bath is quite ready. It will help to make you strong again. Come, let us be quick, for fear the water should get cold." Her daughter was at hand too, and between them they carried the queen, who was still very weak, into the bathroom and laid her in the bath. Then they locked the door and ran away. They took care beforehand to make a blazing hot fire under the bath, so that the lovely young queen might be suffocated. As soon as they were sure this was the case, the old witch tied a cap on her daughter's head and laid her in the queen's bed. She managed, too, to make her figure and general appearance look like the queen's. But even her power could not restore the eye she had lost. So she made her lie on the side of the missing eye in order to prevent the king's noticing anything. In the evening, when the king came home and heard the news of his son's birth, he was full of delight and insisted on going at once to his dear wife's bedside to see how she was getting on. But the old witch cried out, "Take care and keep the curtains drawn. Don't let the light get into the queen's eyes. She must be kept perfectly quiet." So the king went away and never knew that it was a false queen who lay in the bed. When midnight came and everyone in the palace was sound asleep, the nurse, who alone watched by the baby's cradle in the nursery, saw the door open gently. And who should come in but the real queen? She lifted the child from its cradle, laid it on her arm, and nursed it for some time. Then she carefully shook up the pillows of the little bed, laid the baby down, and tucked the coverlet in all round him. She did not forget the little roe either, but went to the corner where it lay, and gently stroked its back. Then she silently left the room. And next morning, when the nurse asked the sentries if they had seen anyone go into the castle that night, they all said, "No, we saw no one at all." For many nights, the queen came in the same way, but she never spoke a word. And the nurse was too frightened to say anything about her visits. After some little time had elapsed, the queen spoke one night and said, "Is my child well? Is my roe well? I'll come back twice, and then farewell." The nurse made no answer, but as soon as the queen had disappeared, she went to the king and told him all. The king exclaimed, "Good heavens, what do you say? I will watch myself tonight by the child's bed." When the evening came, he went to the nursery, and at midnight the queen appeared and said, "Is my child well? Is my roe well? I'll come back once, and then farewell." And she nursed and petted the child, as usual, before she disappeared. The king dared not trust himself to speak to her, but the following night he kept watch again. That night, when the queen came, she said, "Is my child well? Is my roe well? I've come this once, and now farewell." Then the king could restrain himself no longer, but sprang to her side and cried, "You can be no one but my dear wife." "Yes," said she, "I am your dear wife." And in the same moment she was restored to life, and was as fresh and well and rosy as ever. Then she told the king all the cruel things the wicked witch and her daughter had done. The king had them both arrested at once and brought to trial, and they were condemned to death. The daughter was led into the forest, where the wild beasts tore her to pieces, and the old witch was burnt at the stake. As soon as she reduced to ashes, the spell was taken off the little Ro, and he was restored to his natural shape once more. And so, brother and sister lived happily ever after. Princess Rosette. Once upon a time, there lived a king and queen who had 2 beautiful sons and 1 little daughter, who was so pretty that no one who saw her could help loving her. When it was time for the christening of the princess, the queen, as she always did, sent for all the fairies to be present at the ceremony, and afterwards invited them to a splendid banquet. When it was over, and they were preparing to go away, the queen said to them, "Do not forget your usual good custom. Tell me what is going to happen to Rosette." For that was the name they had given the princess. But the fairies said they had left their book of magic at home, and they would come another day and tell her. "Ah," said the queen, "I know very well what that means. You have nothing good to say, but at least I beg that you will not hide anything from me." So, after a great deal of persuasion, they said, "Madam, we fear that Rosette may be the cause of great misfortunes to her brothers. They may even meet with their death through her. That is all we have been able to foresee about your dear little daughter. We are very sorry to have nothing better to tell you." Then they went away, leaving the queen very sad, so sad that the king noticed it, and asked her what was the matter. The queen said that she had been sitting too near the fire, and had burnt all the flax that was upon her distaff. "Oh, is that all?" said the king, and he went up into the garret and brought her down more flax than she could spin in 100 years. But the queen still looked sad, and the king asked her again what was the matter. She answered that she had been walking by the river and had dropped one of her green satin slippers into the water. "Oh, if that's all," said the king. And he sent to all the shoemakers in his kingdom, and they very soon made the queen 10,000 green satin slippers. But still, she looked sad. So the king asked her again what was the matter, and this time she answered that in eating her porridge too hastily, she had swallowed her wedding ring. But it so happened that the king knew better, for he had the ring himself. And he said, "Oh, you are not telling me the truth, for I have your ring here in my purse." Then the queen was very much ashamed. and she saw that the king was vexed with her. So she told him all that the fairies had predicted about Rosette, and begged him to think how the misfortunes might be prevented. Then it was the king's turn to look sad, and at last he said, "I see no way of saving our sons except by having Rosette's head cut off while she is still little." But the queen cried that she would far rather have her own head cut off, and that he had better think of something else, for she would never consent to such a thing. So they thought and thought, but they could not tell what to do. Until at last the queen heard that in a great forest near the castle there was an old hermit who lived in a hollow tree, and that people came from far and near to consult him. So she said, "I had better go and ask his advice. Perhaps he will know what to do to prevent the misfortunes which the fairies foretold." She set out very early the next morning, mounted upon a pretty little white mule, which was shod with solid gold, and 2 of her ladies rode behind her on beautiful horses. When they reached the forest, they dismounted, for the trees grew so thickly that the horses could not pass, and made their way on foot to the hollow tree where the hermit lived. At first, when he saw them coming, he was vexed, for he was not fond of ladies. But when he recognized the queen, he said, "You are welcome, queen. What do you come to ask of me?" Then the queen told him all the fairies had foreseen for Rosette, and asked what she should do. And the hermit answered that she must shut the princess up in a tower, and never let her come out of it again. The queen thanked and rewarded him, and hastened back to the castle to tell the king. When he heard the news, he had a great tower built as quickly as possible, and there the princess was shut up, and the king and queen and her 2 brothers went to see her every day, that she might not be dull. The eldest brother was called the Great Prince, and the second the Little Prince. They loved their sister dearly, for she was the sweetest, prettiest princess who was ever seen, and the least little smile from her was worth more than 100 pieces of gold. When Rosette was 15 years old, the great prince went to the king and asked if it would not soon be time for her to be married. And the little prince put the same question to the queen. Their majesties were amused at them for thinking of it, but did not make any reply. And soon after, both the king and the queen were taken ill, and died on the same day. Everybody was sorry, Rosette especially, and all the bells in the kingdom were tolled. Then all the dukes and counselors put the great prince upon a golden throne, and crowned him with a diamond crown. And they all cried, "Long live the king!" And after that, there was nothing but feasting and rejoicing. The new king and his brother said to one another, "Now that we are the masters, let us take our sister out of that dull tower which she is so tired of." They had only to go across the garden to reach the tower, which was very high, and stood up in a corner. Rosette was busy at her embroidery, but when she saw her brothers, she got up, and taking the king's hand, cried, "Good morning, dear brother. Now that you are king, please take me out of this dull tower, for I am so tired of it." Then she began to cry, but the king kissed her and told her to dry her tears, as that was just what they had come for, to take her out of the tower and bring her to their beautiful castle. And the prince showed her the pocketful of sugar plums he had brought for her, and said, "Make haste, and let us get away from this ugly tower, and very soon the king will arrange a grand marriage for you." When Rosette saw the beautiful garden, full of fruit and flowers, with green grass and sparkling fountains, she was so astonished that not a word could she say, for she had never in her life seen anything like it before. She looked about her and ran hither and thither, gathering fruit and flowers. And her little dog, Frisk, who was bright green all over and had but one ear, danced before her, crying, "Bow, wow, wow," and turning head over heels in the most enchanting way. Everybody was amused at Frisk's antics, but all of a sudden he ran away into a little wood, and the princess was following him, when, to her great delight, she saw a peacock who was spreading his tail in the sunshine. Rosette thought she had never seen anything so pretty. She could not take her eyes off him, and there she stood, entranced, until the king and the prince came up and asked what was amusing her so much. She showed them the peacock and asked what it was, and they answered that it was a bird which people sometimes ate. "What?" said the princess. "Do they dare to kill that beautiful creature and eat it? I declare that I will never marry anyone but the king of the peacocks, and when I am queen, I will take very good care that nobody eats any of my subjects." At this, the king was very much astonished. "But, little sister," said he, "where shall we find the king of the peacocks?" "Oh, wherever you like, sire," she answered, "but I will never marry anyone else." After this, they took Rosette to the beautiful castle, and the peacock was brought with her, and told to walk about on the terrace outside her windows, so that she might always see him. And then the ladies of the court came to see the princess, and they brought her beautiful presents, dresses and ribbons and sweetmeats, diamonds and pearls and dolls and embroidered slippers, and she was so well brought up, and said, "Thank you," so prettily, and was so gracious that everyone went away delighted with her. Meanwhile, the king and the prince were considering how they should find the king of the peacocks, if there was such a person in the world. And first of all, they had a portrait made of the princess, which was so like her that you really would not have been surprised if it had spoken to you. Then they said to her, "Since you will not marry anyone but the king of the peacocks, we are going out together into the wide world to search for him. If we find him for you, we shall be very glad. In the meantime, mind you, take good care of our kingdom." Rosette thanked them for all the trouble they were taking on her account, and promised to take great care of the kingdom, and only to amuse herself by looking at the peacock and making Frisk dance while they were away. So they set out and asked everyone they met, "Do you know the king of the peacocks?" But the answer was always, "No, no, Tom." Then they went on and on, so far that no one has ever been farther. And at last they came to the kingdom of the cockchafers. They had never before seen such a number of cockchafers, and the buzzing was so loud that the king was afraid he should be deafened by it. He asked the most distinguished-looking cockchafer they met if he knew where they could find the king of the peacocks. "Sire," replied the cockchafer, "his kingdom is 30,000 leagues from this. You have come the longest way." "And how do you know that?" said the king. "Oh," said the cockchafer, "we all know you very well, since we spend 2 or 3 months in your garden every year." Thereupon the king and the prince made great friends with him, and they all walked arm in arm and dined together. And afterwards, the cockchafer showed them all the curiosities of his strange country, where the tiniest green leaf costs a gold piece, and more. Then they set out again to finish their journey, and this time, as they knew the way, they were not long upon the road. It was easy to guess that they had come to the right place, for they saw peacocks in every tree, and their cries could be heard a long way off. When they reached the city, they found it full of men and women who were dressed entirely in peacocks' feathers, which were evidently thought prettier than anything else. They soon met the king, who was driving about in a beautiful little golden carriage which glittered with diamonds and was drawn at full speed by 12 peacocks. The king and the prince were delighted to see that the king of the peacocks was as handsome as possible. He had curly golden hair and was very pale, and he wore a crown of peacock's feathers. When he saw Rosette's brothers, he knew at once that they were strangers, and stopping his carriage, he sent for them to speak to him. When they had greeted him, they said, "Sire, we have come from very far away to show you a beautiful portrait." So saying, they drew from their traveling bag the picture of Rosette. The king looked at it in silence a long time, but at last he said, "I could not have believed that there was such a beautiful princess in the world. Indeed, she is really 100 times as pretty as that," said her brothers. "I think you must be making fun of me," replied the king of the peacocks. "Sire," said the prince, "my brother is a king, like yourself. He is called the king. I am called the prince. And that is the portrait of our sister, the Princess Rosette. We have come to ask if you would like to marry her. She is as good as she is beautiful, and we will give her a bushel of gold pieces for her dowry." "Oh, with all my heart," replied the king, "and I will make her very happy. She shall have whatever she likes, and I shall love her dearly. Only I warn you that if she is not as pretty as you have told me, I will have your heads cut off." "Oh, certainly, we quite agree to that," said the brothers in one breath. "Very well, off with you into prison, and stay there until the princess arrives," said the king of the peacocks. And the princes were so sure that Rosette was far prettier than her portrait that they went without a murmur. They were very kindly treated, and that they might not feel dull, the king came often to see them. As for Rosette's portrait, that was taken up to the palace, and the king did nothing but gaze at it all day and all night. As the king and the prince had to stay in prison, they sent a letter to the princess telling her to pack up all her treasures as quickly as possible and come to them, as the king of the peacocks was waiting to marry her. But they did not say that they were in prison, for fear of making her uneasy. When Rosette received the letter, she was so delighted that she ran about telling everyone that the king of the peacocks was found, and she was going to marry him. Guns were fired, and fireworks let off. Everyone had as many cakes and sweetmeats as he wanted, and for 3 days, everybody who came to see the princess was presented with a slice of bread and jam, a nightingale's egg, and some hippocras. After having thus entertained her friends, she distributed her dolls among them and left her brother's kingdom to the care of the wisest old men of the city, telling them to take charge of everything, not to spend any money, but save it all up until the king should return, and above all, not to forget to feed her peacock. Then she set out, only taking with her her nurse and the nurse's daughter, and the little green dog, Frisk. They took a boat and put out to sea, carrying with them the bushel of gold pieces and enough dresses to last the princess 10 years if she wore 2 every day. And they did nothing but laugh and sing. The nurse asked the boatman, "Can you take us? Can you take us to the kingdom of the peacocks?" But he answered, "Oh no, oh no." Then she said, "You must take us, you must take us." And he answered, "Very soon, very soon." Then the nurse said, "Will you take us? Will you take us?" And the boatman answered, "Yes, yes." Then she whispered in his ear, "Do you want to make your fortune?" And he said, "Certainly I do. I can tell you how to get a bag of gold," said she. "I ask nothing better," said the boatman. "Well," said the nurse, "tonight, when the princess is asleep, you must help me to throw her into the sea. And when she is drowned, I will put her beautiful clothes upon my daughter, and we will take her to the king of the peacocks, who will be only too glad to marry her. And as your reward, you shall have your boat full of diamonds." The boatman was very much surprised at this proposal and said, "But what a pity to drown such a pretty princess." However, at last the nurse persuaded him to help her, and when the night came and the princess was fast asleep as usual, with Frisk curled up on his own cushion at the foot of her bed, the wicked nurse fetched the boatman and her daughter, and between them they picked up the princess, feather bed, mattress, pillows, blankets, and all, and threw her into the sea without even waking her. Now, luckily, the princess's bed was entirely stuffed with phoenix feathers, which are very rare and have the property of always floating upon water. So Rosette went on swimming about as if she had been in a boat. After a little while, she began to feel very cold and turned round so often that she woke Frisk, who started up and, having a very good nose, smelt the soles and herrings so close to him that he began to bark. He barked so long and so loud that he woke all the other fish, who came swimming up round the princess's bed and poking at it with their great heads. As for her, she said to herself, "How our boat does rock upon the water! I am really glad that I am not often as uncomfortable as I have been tonight." The wicked nurse and the boatman, who were by this time quite a long way off, heard Frisk barking and said to each other, "That horrid little animal and his mistress are drinking our health in seawater now. Let us make haste to land, for we must be quite near the city of the king of the peacocks." The king had sent 100 carriages to meet them, drawn by every kind of strange animal. There were lions, bears, wolves, stags, horses, buffaloes, eagles, and peacocks. The carriage intended for the Princess Rosette had 6 blue monkeys, which could turn somersaults and dance on a tightrope and do many other charming tricks. Their harness was all of crimson velvet with gold buckles, and behind the carriage walked 60 beautiful ladies chosen by the king to wait upon Rosette and amuse her. The nurse had taken all the pains imaginable to deck out her daughter. She put on her Rosette's prettiest frock and covered her with diamonds from head to foot. But she was so ugly that nothing could make her look nice. And what was worse, she was sulky and ill-tempered, and did nothing but grumble all the time. When she stepped from the boat, and the escort sent by the king of the peacocks caught sight of her, they were so surprised that they could not say a single word. "Now then, look alive," cried the false princess. "If you don't bring me something to eat, I will have all your heads cut off." Then they whispered one to another, "Here's a pretty state of things. She is as wicked as she is ugly. What a bride for our poor king. She certainly was not worth bringing from the other end of the world." But she went on ordering them all about, and for no fault at all would give slaps and pinches to everyone she could reach. As the procession was so long, it advanced, but slowly, and the nurse's daughter sat up in her carriage, trying to look like a queen. But the peacocks, who were sitting upon every tree waiting to salute her, and who had made up their minds to cry, "Long live our beautiful queen," when they caught sight of the false bride, could not help crying instead, "Oh, how ugly she is," which offended her so much that she said to the guards, "Make haste and kill all these insolent peacocks who have dared to insult me." But the peacocks only flew away, laughing at her. The rogue of a boatman who noticed all this said softly to the nurse, "This is a bad business for us, gossip. Your daughter ought to have been prettier." But she answered, "Be quiet, stupid, or you will spoil everything." Now they told the king that the princess was approaching. "Well," said he, "did her brothers tell me truly? Is she prettier than her portrait?" "Sire," they answered, "if she were as pretty, that would do very well." "That's true," said the king. "I, for one, shall be quite satisfied if she is. Let us go and meet her." For they knew by the uproar that she had arrived, but they could not tell what all the shouting was about. The king thought he could hear the words, "How ugly she is! How ugly she is!" And he fancied they must refer to some dwarf the princess was bringing with her. It never occurred to him that they could apply to the bride herself. The Princess Rosette's portrait was carried at the head of the procession, and after it walked, the king surrounded by his courtiers. He was all impatience to see the lovely princess, but when he caught sight of the nurse's daughter, he was furiously angry and would not advance another step, for she was really ugly enough to have frightened anybody. "What?" he cried. "Have the two rascals who are my prisoners dared to play me such a trick as this? Do they propose that I shall marry this hideous creature? Let her be shut up in my great tower with her nurse and those who brought her here. And as for them, I will have their heads cut off." Meanwhile, the king and the prince, who knew that their sister must have arrived, had made themselves smart and sat expecting every minute to be summoned to greet her. So when the jailer came with soldiers and carried them down into a black dungeon which swarmed with toads and bats, and where they were up to their necks in water, nobody could have been more surprised and dismayed than they were. "This is a dismal kind of wedding," they said. "What can have happened that we should be treated like this? They must mean to kill us." And this idea annoyed them very much. 3 days passed before they heard any news, and then the king of the peacocks came and berated them through a hole in the wall. "You have called yourselves king and prince," he cried, "to try and make me marry your sister. But you are nothing but beggars, not worth the water you drink. I mean to make short work with you. And the sword is being sharpened that will cut off your heads." "King of the peacocks," answered the king angrily, "you had better take care what you are about. I am as good a king as yourself, and have a splendid kingdom, and robes and crowns, and plenty of good red gold to do what I like with. You are pleased to jest about having our heads cut off. Perhaps you think we have stolen something from you." At first, the king of the peacocks was taken aback by this bold speech, and had half a mind to send them all away together. But his prime minister declared that it would never do to let such a trick as that pass unpunished. Everybody would laugh at him. So the accusation was drawn up against them, that they were impostors, and that they had promised the king a beautiful princess in marriage, who, when she arrived, proved to be an ugly peasant girl. This accusation was read to the prisoners, who cried out that they had spoken the truth, that their sister was indeed a princess more beautiful than the day, and that there was some mystery about all this which they could not fathom. Therefore, they demanded 7 days in which to prove their innocence. The king of the peacocks was so angry that he would hardly even grant them this favor, but at last he was persuaded to do so. While all this was going on at court, let us see what had been happening to the real princess. When the day broke, she and Frisk were equally astonished at finding themselves alone upon the sea, with no boat and no one to help them. The princess cried and cried until even the fishes were sorry for her. "Alas," she said, "the king of the peacocks must have ordered me to be thrown into the sea because he had changed his mind and did not want to marry me. But how strange of him, when I should have loved him so much, and we should have been so happy together." And then she cried harder than ever, for she could not help still loving him. So for 2 days they floated up and down the sea, wet and shivering with the cold, and so hungry that when the princess saw some oysters, she caught them. And she and Frisk both ate some, though they didn't like them at all. When night came, the princess was so frightened that she said to Frisk, "Oh, do please keep on barking, for fear the souls should come and eat us up." Now it happened that they had floated close in to the shore, where a poor old man lived all alone in a little cottage. When he heard Frisk's barking, he thought to himself, "There must have been a shipwreck," for no dogs ever passed that way by any chance, and he went out to see if he could be of any use. He soon saw the princess and Frisk floating up and down, and Rosette, stretching out her hands to him, cried, "Oh, good old man, do save me, or I shall die of cold and hunger." When he heard her cry out so piteously, he was very sorry for her, and ran back into his house to fetch a long boat hook. Then he waded into the water up to his chin, and after being nearly drowned once or twice, he at last succeeded in getting hold of the princess's bed and dragging it on shore. Rosette and Frisk were joyful enough to find themselves once more on dry land, and the princess thanked the old man heartily. Then, wrapping herself up in her blankets, she daintily picked her way up to the cottage on her little bare feet. There the old man lighted a fire of straw, and then drew from an old box his wife's dress and shoes, which the princess put on, and thus roughly clad looked as charming as possible, and Frisk danced his very best to amuse her. The old man saw that Rosette must be some great lady, for her bed coverings were all of satin and gold. He begged that she would tell him all her history, as she might safely trust him. The princess told him everything, weeping bitterly again at the thought that it was by the king's orders that she had been thrown overboard. "And now, my daughter, what is to be done?" said the old man. "You are a great princess, accustomed to fare daintily, and I have nothing to offer you but black bread and radishes, which will not suit you at all. Shall I go and tell the king of the peacocks that you are here? If he sees you, he will certainly wish to marry you." "Oh no," cried Rosette. "He must be wicked, since he tried to drown me. Don't let us tell him. But if you have a little basket, give it to me." The old man gave her a basket, and tying it round Frisk's neck, she said to him, "Go and find out the best cooking pot in the town, and bring the contents to me." Away went Frisk, and as there was no better dinner cooking in all the town than the king's, he adroitly took the cover off the pot and brought all it contained to the princess, who said, "Now go back to the pantry and bring the best of everything you find there." So Frisk went back and filled his basket with white bread and red wine and every kind of sweetmeat, until it was almost too heavy for him to carry. When the king of the peacocks wanted his dinner, there was nothing in the pot and nothing in the pantry. All the courtiers looked at one another in dismay, and the king was terribly cross. "Oh well," he said, "if there is no dinner, I cannot dine, but take care that plenty of things are roasted for supper." When evening came, the princess said to Frisk, "Go into the town and find out the best kitchen, and bring me all the nicest morsels that are being roasted upon the spit." Frisk did as he was told, and as he knew of no better kitchen than the king's, he went in softly, and when the cook's back was turned, took everything that was upon the spit. As it happened, it was all done to a turn, and looked so good that it made him hungry only to see it. He carried his basket to the princess, who at once sent him back to the pantry to bring all the tarts and sugar plums that had been prepared for the king's supper. The king, as he had had no dinner, was very hungry and wanted his supper early. But when he asked for it, lo and behold, it was all gone, and he had to go to bed half-starved and in a terrible temper. The next day, the same thing happened, and the next, so that for 3 days the king got nothing at all to eat, because just when the dinner or the supper was ready to be served, it mysteriously disappeared. At last, the prime minister began to be afraid that the king would be starved to death, so he resolved to hide himself in some dark corner of the kitchen and never take his eyes off the cooking pot. His surprise was great when he presently saw a little green dog with one ear slip softly into the kitchen, uncover the pot, transfer all its contents to his basket, and run off. The prime minister followed hastily and tracked him all through the town to the cottage of the good old man. Then he ran back to the king and told him that he had found out where all his dinners and suppers went. The king, who was very much astonished, said he should like to go and see for himself. So he set out, accompanied by the prime minister and a guard of archers, and arrived just in time to find the old man and the princess finishing his dinner. The king ordered that they should be seized and bound with ropes, and Frisk also. When they were brought back to the palace, someone told the king, who said, "Today is the last day of the respite granted to those impostors. They shall have their heads cut off at the same time as these stealers of my dinner." Then the old man went down on his knees before the king and begged for time to tell him everything. While he spoke, the king for the first time looked attentively at the princess, because he was sorry to see how she cried. And when he heard the old man saying that her name was Rosette, and that she had been treacherously thrown into the sea, he turned head over heels 3 times without stopping, in spite of being quite weak from hunger, and ran to embrace her, and untied the ropes which bound her with his own hands, declaring that he loved her with all his heart. Messengers were sent to bring the princes out of prison, and they came very sadly, believing that they were to be executed at once. The nurse and her daughter and the boatman were brought also. As soon as they came in, Rosette ran to embrace her brothers, while the traitors threw themselves down before her and begged for mercy. The king and the princess were so happy that they freely forgave them. And as for the good old man, he was splendidly rewarded, and spent the rest of his days in the palace. The king of the peacocks made ample amends to the king and prince for the way in which they had been treated, and did everything in his power to show how sorry he was. The nurse restored to Rosette all her dresses and jewels, and the bushel of gold pieces. The wedding was held at once, and they all lived happily ever after, even to Frisk, who enjoyed the greatest luxury, and never had anything worse than the wing of a partridge for dinner all the rest of his life. The Enchanted Pig. Once upon a time, there lived a king who had 3 daughters. Now it happened that he had to go out to battle, so he called his daughters and said to them, "My dear children, I am obliged to go to the wars. The enemy is approaching us with a large army. It is a great grief to me to leave you all. During my absence, take care of yourselves and be good girls. Behave well and look after everything in the house. You may walk in the garden, and you may go into all the rooms in the palace, except the room at the back in the right-hand corner. Into that you must not enter, for harm would befall you. You may keep your mind easy, Father," they replied. "We have never been disobedient to you. Go in peace, and may heaven give you a glorious victory." When everything was ready for his departure, the king gave them the keys of all the rooms and reminded them once more of what he had said. His daughters kissed his hands with tears in their eyes and wished him prosperity. And he gave the eldest the keys. Now when the girls found themselves alone, they felt so sad and dull that they did not know what to do. So, to pass the time, they decided to work for part of the day, to read for part of the day, and to enjoy themselves in the garden for part of the day. As long as they did this, all went well with them. But this happy state of things did not last long. Every day they grew more and more curious, and you will see what the end of that was. "Sisters," said the eldest princess, all day long we sew, spin, and read. We have been several days quite alone, and there is no corner of the garden that we have not explored. We have been in all the rooms of our father's palace and have admired the rich and beautiful furniture. Why should not we go into the room that our father forbade us to enter?" "Sister," said the youngest, "I cannot think how you can tempt us to break our father's command. When he told us not to go into that room, he must have known what he was saying, and have had a good reason for saying it. Surely the sky won't fall about our heads if we do go in," said the second princess. "Dragons and such like monsters that would devour us will not be hidden in the room. And how will our father ever find out that we have gone in?" While they were speaking thus, encouraging each other, they had reached the room. The eldest fitted the key into the lock, and snap! The door stood open. The three girls entered. And what do you think they saw? The room was quite empty and without any ornament, but in the middle stood a large table with a gorgeous cloth, and on it lay a big open book. Now the princesses were curious to know what was written in the book, especially the eldest. And this is what she read: "The eldest daughter of this king will marry a prince from the east." Then the second girl stepped forward, and turning over the page, she read, "The second daughter of this king will marry a prince from the west." The girls were delighted and laughed and teased each other. But the youngest princess did not want to go near the table or to open the book. Her elder sisters, however, left her no peace. And will she, nill she, they dragged her up to the table, and in fear and trembling she turned over the page and read, "The youngest daughter of this king will be married to a pig from the north." Now if a thunderbolt had fallen upon her from heaven, it would not have frightened her more. She almost died of misery, and if her sisters had not held her up, she would have sunk to the ground and cut her head open. When she came out of the fainting fit into which she had fallen in her terror, her sisters tried to comfort her, saying, "How can you believe such nonsense? When did it ever happen that a king's daughter married a pig?" "What a baby you are," said the other sister. "Has not our father enough soldiers to protect you, even if the disgusting creature did come to woo you?" The youngest princess would fain have let herself be convinced by her sister's words, and have believed what they said. But her heart was heavy. Her thoughts kept turning to the book, in which stood written that great happiness waited her sisters, but that a fate was in store for her, such as had never before been known in the world. Besides, the thought weighed on her heart that she had been guilty of disobeying her father. She began to get quite ill, and in a few days she was so changed that it was difficult to recognize her. Formerly, she had been rosy and merry. Now she was pale, and nothing gave her any pleasure. She gave up playing with her sisters in the garden, ceased to gather flowers to put in her hair, and never sang when they sat together at their spinning and sewing. In the meantime, the king won a great victory, and having completely defeated and driven off the enemy, he hurried home to his daughters, to whom his thoughts had constantly turned. Everyone went out to meet him with cymbals and fifes and drums, and there was great rejoicing over his victorious return. The king's first act on reaching home was to thank heaven for the victory he had gained over the enemies who had risen against him. He then entered his palace, and the 3 princesses stepped forward to meet him. His joy was great when he saw that they were all well, for the youngest did her best not to appear sad. In spite of this, however, it was not long before the king noticed that his 3rd daughter was getting very thin and sad-looking, and all of a sudden he felt as if a hot iron were entering his soul, for it flashed through his mind that she had disobeyed his word. He felt sure he was right, but to be quite certain, he called his daughters to him, questioned them, and ordered them to speak the truth. They confessed everything, but took good care not to say which had led the other 2 into temptation. The king was so distressed when he heard it that he was almost overcome by grief. But he took heart and tried to comfort his daughters, who looked frightened to death. He saw that what had happened, and that 1,000 words would not alter matters by a hair's breadth. Well, these events had almost been forgotten when one fine day a prince from the east appeared at the court and asked the king for the hand of his eldest daughter. The king gladly gave his consent. A great wedding banquet was prepared, and after 3 days of feasting, the happy pair were accompanied to the frontier with much ceremony and rejoicing. After some time, the same thing befell the 2nd daughter, who was wooed and won by a prince from the west. Now when the young princess saw that everything fell out exactly as had been written in the book, she grew very sad. She refused to eat, and would not put on her fine clothes, nor go out walking, and declared that she would rather to die than become a laughing stock to the world. But the king would not allow her to do anything so wrong, and he comforted her in all possible ways. So the time passed, till lo and behold, one fine day, an enormous pig from the north walked into the palace, and going straight up to the king said, "Hail, O king! May your life be as prosperous and bright as sunrise on a clear day." So, "I am glad to see you well, friend," answered the king. "But what wind has brought you hither?" "I come a-wooing," replied the pig. Now the king was astonished to hear so fine a speech from a pig, and at once it occurred to him that something strange was the matter. He would gladly have turned the pig's thoughts in another direction, as he did not wish to give him the princess for a wife. But when he heard that the court and the whole street were full of all the pigs in the world, he saw that there was no escape, and that he must give his consent. The pig was not satisfied with mere promises, but insisted that the wedding should take place within a week, and would not go away till the king had sworn a royal oath upon it. The king then sent for his daughter and advised her to submit to fate, as there was nothing else to be done. And he added, "My child, the words and whole behavior of this pig are quite unlike those of other pigs. I do not myself believe that he always was a pig. Depend upon it, some magic or witchcraft has been at work. Obey him and do everything that he wishes, and I feel sure that heaven will shortly send you release." "If you wish me to do this, dear father, I will do it," replied the girl. In the meantime, the wedding day drew near. After the marriage, the pig and his bride set out for his home in one of the royal carriages. On the way, they passed a great bog, and the pig ordered the carriage to stop, and got out, and rolled about in the mire till he was covered with mud from head to foot. Then he got back into the carriage and told his wife to kiss him. What was the poor girl to do? She bethought herself of her father's words, and pulling out her pocket handkerchief, she gently wiped the pig's snout and kissed it. By the time they reached the pig's dwelling, which stood in a thick wood, it was quite dark. They sat down quietly for a little, as they were tired after their drive. Then they had supper together and lay down to rest. During the night, the princess noticed that the pig had changed into a man. She was not a little surprised, but remembering her father's words, she took courage, determined to wait and see what would happen. And now she noticed that every night the pig became a man, and every morning he was changed into a pig before she awoke. This happened several nights running, and the princess could not understand it at all. Clearly, her husband must be bewitched. In time, she grew quite fond of him. He was so kind and gentle. One fine day, as she was sitting alone, she saw an old witch go past. She felt quite excited, as it was so long since she had seen a human being, and she called out to the old woman to come and talk to her. Among other things, the witch told her that she understood all magic arts, and that she could foretell the future, and knew the healing powers of herbs and plants. "I shall be grateful to you all my life, old dame," said the princess, "if you will tell me what is the matter with my husband. Why is he a pig by day and a human being by night?" "I was just going to tell you that one thing, my dear. to show you what a good fortune teller I am. If you like, I will give you a herb to break the spell. If you will only give it to me, said the princess, I will give you anything you choose to ask for I cannot bear to see him in this state. Here then, my dear child, said the witch, take this thread, but do not let him know about it, for if he did, it would lose its healing power. At night, when he is asleep, you must get up very quietly and fasten the thread round his left foot as firmly as possible, and you will see in the morning he will not have changed back into a pig, but will still be a man. I do not want any reward. I shall be sufficiently repaid by knowing that you are happy. It almost breaks my heart to think of all you have suffered, and I only wish I had known it sooner, as I should have come to your rescue at once. When the old witch had gone away, the princess hid the thread very carefully, and at night she got up quietly, and with a beating heart she bound the thread round her husband's foot. Just as she was pulling the knot tight, there was a crack, and the thread broke, for it was rotten. Her husband awoke with a start, and said to her, Unhappy woman, what have you done? 3 days more, and this unholy spell would have fallen from me. And now, who knows how long I may have to go about in this disgusting shape? I must leave you at once, and we shall not meet again until you have worn out 3 pairs of iron shoes and blunted a steel staff in your search for me. So saying, he disappeared. Now, when the princess was left alone, she began to weep and moan in a way that was pitiful to hear. But when she saw that her tears and groans did her no good, she got up, determined to go wherever fate should lead her. On reaching a town, the first thing she did was to order 3 pairs of iron sandals and a steel staff. And having made these preparations for her journey, she set out in search of her husband. On and on she wandered over 9 seas and across 9 continents, through forests with trees whose stems were as thick as beer barrels, stumbling and knocking herself against the fallen branches, then picking herself up and going on. The boughs of the trees hit her face, and the shrubs tore her hands, but on she went, and never looked back. At last, wearied with her long journey, and worn out, and overcome with sorrow, but still with hope at her heart, she reached a house. Now, who do you think lived there? The moon. The princess knocked at the door and begged to be let in that she might rest a little. The mother of the moon, when she saw her sad plight, felt a great pity for her, and took her in, and nursed and tended her. And while she was here, the princess had a little baby. One day, the mother of the moon asked her, "How was it possible for you, a mortal, to get hither to the house of the moon?" Then the poor princess told her all that happened to her, and added, "I shall always be thankful to heaven for leading me hither, and grateful to you that you took pity on me and on my baby, and did not leave us to die. Now I beg one last favor of you. Can your daughter, the moon, tell me where my husband is?" "She cannot tell you that, my child," replied the goddess. "But if you will travel towards the east until you reach the dwelling of the sun, he may be able to tell you something." Then she gave the princess a roast chicken to eat, and warned her to be very careful not to lose any of the bones, because they might be of great use to her. When the princess had thanked her once more for her hospitality and for her good advice, and had thrown away one pair of shoes that were worn out, and had put on a second pair, she tied up the chicken bones in a bundle, and taking her baby in her arms and her staff in her hand, she set out once more on her wanderings. On and on and on she went across bare, sandy deserts, where the roads were so heavy that for every 2 steps that she took forwards, she fell back 1. But she struggled on till she had passed these dreary plains. Next, she crossed high rocky mountains, jumping from crag to crag and from peak to peak. Sometimes she would rest for a little on a mountain, and then start afresh, always farther and farther on. She had to cross swamps and to scale mountain peaks covered with flints, so that her feet and knees and elbows were all torn and bleeding. And sometimes she came to a precipice across which she could not jump, and she had to crawl round on hands and knees, helping herself along with her staff. At length, wearied to death, she reached the palace in which the sun lived. She knocked and begged for admission. The mother of the sun opened the door and was astonished at beholding a mortal from the distant earthly shores, and wept with pity when she heard of all she had suffered. Then, having promised to ask her son about the princess's husband, she hid her in the cellar, so that the son might notice nothing on his return home, for he was always in a bad temper when he came in at night. The next day, the princess feared that things would not go well with her, for the son had noticed that someone from the other world had been in the palace, but his mother had soothed him with soft words, assuring him that this was not so. So the princess took heart when she saw how kindly she was treated, and asked, "But how in the world is it possible for the sun to be angry? He is so beautiful and so good to mortals." "This is how it happens," replied the sun's mother. "In the morning, when he stands at the gates of paradise, he is happy and smiles on the whole world. But during the day, he gets cross because he sees all the evil deeds of men. And that is why his heat becomes so scorching. But in the evening, he is both sad and angry, for he stands at the gates of death. That is his usual course. From there, he comes back here. She then told the princess that she had asked about her husband, but that her son had replied that he knew nothing about him, and that her only hope was to go and inquire of the wind. Before the princess left, the mother of the son gave her a roast chicken to eat, and advised her to take great care of the bones, which she did, wrapping them up in a bundle. She then threw away her second pair of shoes, which were quite worn out, and with her child on her arm and her staff in her hand, she set forth on her way to the wind. In these wanderings, she met with even greater difficulties than before, for she came upon one mountain of flints after another, out of which tongues of fire would flame up. She passed through woods which had never been trodden by human foot, and had to cross fields of ice and avalanches of snow. The poor woman nearly died of these hardships, but she kept a brave heart, and at length she reached an enormous cave in the side of a mountain. This was where the wind lived. There was a little door in the railing in front of the cave, and here the princess knocked and begged for admission. The mother of the wind had pity on her and took her in, that she might rest a little. Here too she was hidden away, so that the wind might not notice her. The next morning, the mother of the wind told her that her husband was living in a thick wood, so thick that no axe had been able to cut a way through it. Here he had built himself a sort of house by placing trunks of trees together and fastening them with withes, and here he lived alone, shunning humankind. After the mother of the wind had given the princess a chicken to eat, and had warned her to take care of the bones, she advised her to go by the Milky Way, which at night lies across the sky, and to wander on till she reached her goal. Having thanked the old woman with tears in her eyes for her hospitality and for the good news she had given her, the princess set out on her journey and rested neither night nor day. So great was her longing to see her husband again. On and on she walked until her last pair of shoes fell in pieces. So she threw them away and went on with bare feet, not heeding the bogs, nor the thorns that wounded her, nor the stones that bruised her. At last she reached a beautiful green meadow on the edge of a wood. Her heart was cheered by the sight of the flowers and the soft, cool grass, and she sat down and rested for a little. But hearing the birds chirping to their mates among the trees made her think with longing of her husband, and she wept bitterly, and taking her child in her arms and her bundle of chicken bones on her shoulder, she entered the wood. For 3 days and 3 nights she struggled through it, but could find nothing. She was quite worn out with weariness and hunger, and even her staff was no further help to her, for in her many wanderings it had become quite blunted. She almost gave up in despair, but made one last great effort. And suddenly, in a thicket, she came upon the sort of house that the Mother of the Wind had described. It had no windows, and the door was up in the roof. Round the house she went in search of steps, but could find none. What was she to do? How was she to get in? She thought and thought, and tried in vain to climb up to the door. Then suddenly she bethought her of the chicken bones that she had dragged all that weary way. And she said to herself, "They would not all have told me to take such good care of these bones if they had not had some good reason for doing so. Perhaps now, in my hour of need, they may be of use to me." So she took the bones out of her bundle, and having thought for a moment, she placed the 2 ends together. To her surprise, they stuck tight. Then she added the other bones, till she had 2 long poles the height of the house. These she placed against the wall at a distance of a yard from one another. Across them she placed the other bones, piece by piece, like the steps of a ladder. As soon as one step was finished, she stood upon it and made the next one, and then the next, till she was close to the door. But just as she got near the top, she noticed that there were no bones left for the last rung of the ladder. What was she to do? Without that last step, the whole ladder was useless. She must have lost one of the bones. Then, suddenly, an idea came to her. Taking a knife, she chopped off her little finger, and placing it on the last step, it stuck, as the bones had done. The ladder was complete, and with her child on her arm, she entered the door of the house. Here she found everything in perfect order. Having taken some food, she laid the child down to sleep in a trough that was on the floor, and sat down herself to rest. When her husband, the pig, came back to his house, he was startled by what he saw. At first, he could not believe his eyes, and stared at the ladder of bones, and at the little finger on the top of it. He felt that some fresh magic must be at work, and in his terror, he almost turned away from the house. But then a better idea came to him, and he changed himself into a dove, so that no witchcraft could have power over him, and flew into the room without touching the ladder. Here he found a woman rocking a child. At the sight of her, looking so changed by all that she had suffered for his sake, his heart was moved by such love and longing, and by so great a pity that he suddenly became a man. The princess stood up when she saw him, and her heart beat with fear, for she did not know him. But when he had told her who he was, in her great joy, she forgot all her sufferings, and they seemed as nothing to her. He was a very handsome man, as straight as a fir tree. They sat down together, and she told him all her adventures, and he wept with pity at the tale. And then he told her his own history. I am a king's son. Once when my father was fighting against some dragons, who were the scourge of our country, I slew the youngest dragon. His mother, who was a witch, cast a spell over me and changed me into a pig. It was she who, in the disguise of an old woman, gave you the thread to bind round my foot, so that instead of the 3 days that had to run before the spell was broken, I was forced to remain a pig for 3 more years. Now that we have suffered for each other and have found each other again, let us forget the past. And in their joy, they kissed one another. Next morning, they set out early to return to his father's kingdom. Great was the rejoicing of all the people when they saw him and his wife. His father and his mother embraced them both, and there was feasting in the palace for 3 days and 3 nights. Then they set out to see her father. The old king nearly went out of his mind with joy at beholding his daughter again. When she had told him all her adventures, he said to her, "Did not I tell you that I was quite sure that that creature who wooed and won you as his wife had not been born a pig? You see, my child, how wise you were in doing what I told you." And as the king was old and had no heirs, he put them on the throne in his place. And they ruled as only kings rule who have suffered many things. And if they are not dead, they are still living and ruling happily. The Norka. Once upon a time, there lived a king and queen. They had 3 sons, 2 of them with their wits about them, but the third a simpleton. Now the king had a deer park in which were quantities of wild animals of different kinds. Into that park there used to come a huge beast. Norka was its name, and do fearful mischief, devouring some of the animals every night. The king did all he could, but he was unable to destroy it. So at last he called his sons together and said, "Whoever will destroy the Norka, to him will I give the half of my kingdom." Well, the eldest son undertook the task. As soon as it was night, he took his weapons and set out. But before he reached the park, he went into a traktor, or tavern, and there he spent the whole night in revelry. When he came to his senses, it was too late. The day had already dawned, He felt himself disgraced in the eyes of his father. But there was no help for it. The next day, the second son went, and did just the same. Their father scolded them both soundly, and there was an end of it. Well, on the third day, the youngest son undertook the task. They all laughed him to scorn because he was so stupid, feeling sure he wouldn't do anything. But he took his arms and went straight into the park and sat down on the grass in such a position that the moment he went to sleep, his weapons would prick him and he would awake. Presently, the midnight hour sounded. The earth began to shake, and the Norka came rushing up and burst right through the fence into the park. So huge was it. The prince pulled himself together, leapt to his feet, crossed himself, and went straight at the beast. It fled back, and the prince ran after it. But he soon saw that he couldn't catch it on foot. So he hastened to the stable, laid his hands on the best horse there, and set off in pursuit. Presently, he came up with the beast, and they began a fight. They fought and fought. The prince gave the beast 3 wounds. At last they were both utterly exhausted, so they lay down to take a short rest. But the moment the prince closed his eyes, up jumped the beast and took to flight. The prince's horse awoke him. Up he jumped in a moment and set off again in pursuit, caught up the beast, and again began fighting with it. Again the prince gave the beast 3 wounds, and then he and the beast lay down again to rest. Thereupon away fled the beast as before. The prince caught it up, and again gave it 3 wounds. But all of a sudden, just as the prince began chasing it for the 4th time, the beast fled to a great white stone, tilted it up, and escaped into the other world, crying out to the prince, "Then only will you overcome me when you enter here." The prince went home, told his father all that had happened, and asked him to have a leather rope plaited, long enough to reach to the other world. His father ordered this to be done. When the rope was made, the prince called for his brothers, and he and they, having taken servants with them, and everything that was needed for a whole year, set out for the place where the beast had disappeared under the stone. When they got there, they built a palace on the spot and lived in it for some time. But when everything was ready, the youngest brother said to the others, "Now, brothers, who is going to lift this stone?" Neither of them could so much as stir it. But as soon as he touched it, away it flew to a distance, though it was ever so big as a hill. And when he had flung the stone aside, he spoke a second time to his brothers, saying, "Who is going into the other world to overcome the Norka?" Neither of them offered to do so. Then he laughed at them for being such cowards, and said, "Well, brothers, farewell. Lower me into the other world, and don't go away from here. but as soon as the cord is jerked, pull it up." His brothers lowered him accordingly, and when he had reached the other world, underneath the earth, he went on his way. He walked and walked. Presently, he espied a horse with rich trappings, and it said to him, "Hail, Prince Ivan! Long have I awaited thee." He mounted the horse and rode on, rode and rode, until he saw standing before him a palace made of copper. He entered the courtyard, tied up his horse, and went indoors. In one of the rooms, a dinner was laid out. He sat down and dined, and then went into a bedroom. There he found a bed, on which he lay down to rest. Presently, there came in a lady, more beautiful than can be imagined anywhere but in a fairy tale, who said, "Thou who art in my house, name thyself. If thou art an old man, thou shalt be my father. If a middle-aged man, my brother. But if a young man, thou shalt be my husband, dear. And if thou art a woman, and an old one, thou shalt be my grandmother. If middle-aged, my mother. And if a girl, thou shalt be my own sister." Thereupon he came forth, and when she saw him, she was delighted with him, and said, "Wherefore, O Prince Ivan, my husband dear shalt thou be, wherefore hast thou come hither?" Then he told her all that had happened, and she said, "That beast which thou wishest to overcome is my brother. He is staying just now with my second sister, who lives not far from here in a silver palace. I bound up 3 of the wounds which thou didst give him." Well, after this they drank, and enjoyed themselves, and held sweet converse together. And then the prince took leave of her, and went on to the second sister, the one who lived in the silver palace, and with her also he stayed a while. She told him that her brother Norka was then at her youngest sister's. So he went on to the youngest sister, who lived in a golden palace. She told him that her brother was at that time asleep on the blue sea, and she gave him a sword of steel and a draught of the water of strength. And she told him to cut off her brother's head at a single stroke. And when he had heard these things, he went his way. And when the prince came to the blue sea, he looked. There slept the Norka on a stone in the middle of the sea. And when it snored, the water was agitated for 7 miles around. The prince crossed himself, went up to it, and smote it on the head with his sword. The head jumped off, saying the while, "Well, I'm done for now," and rolled far away into the sea. After killing the beast, the prince went back again, picking up all the 3 sisters by the way, with the intention of taking them out into the upper world. For they all loved him and would not be separated from him. Each of them turned her palace into an egg, for they were all enchantresses, and they taught him how to turn the eggs into palaces and back again, and they handed over the eggs to him. And then they all went to the place from which they had to be hoisted into the upper world. And when they came to where the rope was, the prince took hold of it and made the maidens fast to it. Then he jerked away at the rope, and his brothers began to haul it up. And when they had hauled it up, and had set eyes on the wondrous maidens, they went aside and said, "Let's lower the rope, pull our brother part of the way up, and then cut the rope. Perhaps he'll be killed. But then if he isn't, he'll never give us these beauties as wives." So when they had agreed on this, they lowered the rope. But their brother was no fool. He guessed what they were at. So he fastened the rope to a stone, and then gave it a pull. His brothers hoisted the stone to a great height, and then cut the rope. Down fell the stone and broke in pieces. The prince poured forth tears and went away. Well, he walked and walked. Presently, a storm arose. The lightning flashed, the thunder roared, the rain fell in torrents. He went up to a tree in order to take shelter under it. And on that tree he saw some young birds which were being thoroughly drenched. So he took off his coat and covered them over with it, and he himself sat down under the tree. Presently there came flying a bird, such a big one that the light was blotted out by it. It had been dark there before, but now it became darker still. Now this was the mother of those small birds which the prince had covered up. And when the bird had come flying up, she perceived that her little ones were covered over, and she said, "Who has wrapped up my nestlings?" And presently, seeing the prince, she added, "Didst thou do that? Thanks. In return, ask of me anything thou desirest. I will do anything for thee. Then carry me into the other world," he replied. "Make me a large vessel with a partition in the middle," she said. "Catch all sorts of game and put them into one half of it, and into the other half pour water, so that there may be meat and drink for me." All this the prince did. Then the bird, having taken the vessel on her back, with the prince sitting in the middle of it, began to fly. And after flying some distance, she brought him to his journey's end, took leave of him, and flew away back. But he went to the house of a certain tailor, and engaged himself as his servant. So much the worse for wear was he. So thoroughly had he altered in appearance that nobody would have suspected him of being a prince. Having entered into the service of this master, the prince began to ask what was going on in that country. And his master replied, "Our 2 princes, for the 3rd one has disappeared, have brought away brides from the other world and want to marry them. But those brides refuse, for they insist on having all their wedding clothes made for them first, exactly like those which they used to have in the other world, and that without being measured for them. The king has called all the workmen together, but not one of them will undertake to do it." The prince, having heard all this, said, "Go to the king, master, and tell him that you will provide everything that's in your line. However, can I undertake to make clothes of that sort? I work for quite common folks," says his master. "Go along, master, I will answer for everything," says the prince. So the tailor went. The king was delighted that at least one good workman had been found, and gave him as much money as ever he wanted. When his tailor had settled everything, he went home. And the prince said to him, "Now then, pray to God, and lie down to sleep. Tomorrow, all will be ready." And the tailor followed his lad's advice and went to bed. Midnight sounded. The prince arose, went out of the city into the fields, took out of his pocket the eggs which the maidens had given him, and, as they had taught him, turned them into 3 palaces. Into each of these he entered, took the maidens' robes, went out again, turned the palaces back into eggs, and went home. And when he got there, he hung up the robes on the wall and lay down to sleep. Early in the morning, his master awoke, and behold, there hung such robes as he had never seen before, all shining with gold and silver and precious stones. He was delighted, and he seized them and carried them off to the king. When the princesses saw that the clothes were those which had been theirs in the other world, they guessed that Prince Ivan was in this world. So they exchanged glances with each other, but they held their peace. And the master, having handed over the clothes, went home, but he no longer found his dear journeyman there, for the prince had gone to a shoemaker's, and him too he sent to work for the king. And in the same way he went the round of all the artificers, and they all proffered him thanks, inasmuch as through him they were enriched by the king. By the time the princely workmen had gone the round of all the artificers, the princesses had received what they had asked for. All their clothes were just like what they had been in the other world. Then they wept bitterly because the prince had not come, and it was impossible for them to hold out any longer. It was necessary that they should be married. But when they were ready for the wedding, the youngest bride said to the king, "Allow me, my father, to go and give alms to the beggars." He gave her leave, and she went and began bestowing alms upon them, and examining them closely. And when she had come to one of them, and was going to give him some money, she caught sight of the ring which she had given to the prince in the other world, and her sister's rings too, for it really was he. So she seized him by the hand and brought him into the hall, and said to the king, "Here is he who brought us out of the other world. His brothers forbade us to say that he was alive, threatening to slay us if we did." Then the king was wroth with those sons, and punished them as he thought best. And afterwards 3 weddings were celebrated.